Doing well. Thanks for taking the time. I see you have your note taker. We're also recording this meeting. Is that we're good?
All good.
Cool.
Welcome to
Awesome.
the brave new world.
All right. Just give me 1 second here to pull my notes.
Akshat, while you're doing that, should we just do intros really quick?
Yes, yes. Let's do that. So I'll start since I'm the one who scheduled this call, and then I'll pass it on to Abe, and then Jonathan. I'd love to hear more about you. So
Okay.
my name is Akshat. I'm a product manager at Great Expectations. I've been with the team for a little under a year now, and I recently, in addition to what I've been doing over the past year, I've started to help product manage GX Core, our open source platform, and so. I'm here to learn more about your experience and see what we can do to make the product better for you and others like you.
Well, I'm Abe Gong. I'm one of the co-founders of Great Expectations. So I've been here since the very beginning, before it was anything other than just sort of an open source hobby project. And just for background, when we created the library, my now co-founder and I, James Campbell, I was a practicing data scientist, data engineer. So it was very much like, hey, the world just needs a solution to this. Let me scratch
Yeah.
my own itch. And it has grown and ballooned and like does all kinds of stuff now. But
Yeah.
my roots are still very much in like, let's make this thing really help solve data quality problems.
Yeah.
Which is why like I've read your blog posts. I'm interested in your take.
Yeah. Great. So yeah, Jonathan with Sparkfish, been working with data for like probably you guys many years. Worked with a number of different stacks, different cloud solutions from Snowflake, Databricks, and more recently doing work in Microsoft Fabric. Focused a lot in spaces like private equity, where they're doing a lot of acquisitions and have data from multiple silos, and having to deal with data quality is a huge part of what we aim to help them address. So yeah, definitely interested in the solutions. I think that just generally speaking, the market, the needs for it are very strong. Getting executives to understand what data quality means from how do you visualize data quality? How do you quantify your the level of quality you have in your data, or the lack of quality, which is what I think we're all aiming to surface with something like GX, is to kind of help surface those issues, and bring awareness. And so the visualizations over theirs that are brought in like the GX Cloud, I think those are fantastic because they help educate. Probably more than anything, I think that's 99% of its value is education. It's like, this is what you mean by data quality, or this is what you mean by our quality sucks, because you can see it, and that's as humans, that's what we need. And I think that's another struggle is, okay, that's one thing to see data quality in the dashboard, but another thing to think about how you monitor it as a developer, or as a data scientist or data engineer. Having those tools, you really, honestly, this is the last thing that most people think about. And let's be honest, 95% of people out there that are developing data engineering projects don't even know about this. That's something to keep in mind, top of mind.
I would like to hope that the need for data quality is more than 5% of the market at this point.
It's 100%, but the engineers actually doing it is probably close to 5%.
Well, I think, I mean, my sense is that goes back to the first issue you raised, which is it's hidden work. Like it's work that needs to be done in order to run an effective organization. But most of the people responsible for budgets and planning, they can't even see it. They have no direct experience with it. So it's very hard for them to make a decision that takes it into account appropriately.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. So yeah, I think that's here. I think that I think I get the vision for GX Cloud, that the intent is really to make this more of a platform. It's not just an open source library, but it's a platform beyond that. So a lot of the infrastructure for GX Core the interface the developer is dealing with, from my perspective, probably is in support of something like GX Cloud that's behind the scenes, that's adapted to the standard framework to integrate into that. The problem is GX Core from your business perspective has to be secondary. You have to on-ramp people first with GX Core. I'm sorry, GX Cloud has to be secondary. GX Core is where you're on-ramping. People aren't going to pay for something they don't know what it is or how to use it or whatever, at least not for the next few years. At this point, you have to sell people GX Core. And right now, guys, I don't have to be the first one to break it to you. There's feedback all over, and looking in Slack and looking in, Reddit and people I've talked to personally, unless you're using it in a framework like DBT, like it's too difficult for most people to kind of wrap their head around, especially with like changes and samples online no longer working, and the very basic, things like ChatGPT not being able to produce code samples that are valid code samples because of all the changes that have happened. And I think that's one of the problems that I think in general, what I'm suggesting means probably further changes, but it's a necessary pain point to deal with because, man, there's way too much setup. Like,
yeah. So, like, we took a few minutes with the engineering team that's like specifically responsible for the open source part of the code base before jumping on the call. And I think overall mood there was it's basically a combination of like, oh, come on, we're working so hard. Why is this guy giving us grief?
Yeah,
On the one side. And then on the other side, I think there's a pretty strong note of like, yeah, we see what you're saying. Here's how I'm looking at this. I want to see if this resonates with you. So GX Core gets deployed all over the place. Like we have students using it for hobby projects. We have people tapping into their data warehouses. We have people using it for like lift and shift migrations from Oracle to Databricks. Like there are a million different places it gets deployed.
Yep.
Our goal with the 1.0 release was to get to a place where the domain model behind the scenes can actually accommodate basically all of those.
Yep.
So that was the main impetus for 1.0, was to get to a place where there's like a stable foundation. It might not be the most convenient for any use case. In fact, it likely will not be the most convenient for any one use case because it's deliberately taking into account all of the like many, many different ways that it might get deployed. But at least that's a stable foundation we can build from.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, because most of the short-term demand around GX Cloud has been for data warehouse type solutions, we've been leaning in harder to kind of smoothing out the pathway for onboarding if you're a Snowflake's user or a Databricks SQL user or something like that. And that's still not perfect, but we're feeling pretty good about it in general. It still needs work, but it makes me actually wonder what's your use case? Like how are you deploying it?
So first of all, we do a lot of different use cases. That's one thing that I don't know if it's not unique, I'm sure, to us, but we do get exposure to all the platforms. Whether we're using a DBT with Postgres, we're using a Delta Live table purely in Databricks, or if we're doing something in Fabric, which is its own mess of basically just think of notebooks in a more traditional sense with less.
Fabric team's been talking to us about deeper integration there, and
yeah,
it's cool, but they're an oddball. I agree.
Yeah. Let them know, because honestly, like, this feedback's important, right? I mean, it's that mismatch of expectations that makes integrations challenging. So we have to talk to each other, figure out how to bridge this gap. So I think the thing that may be different in the way that I'm kind of personally approaching it is looking at some homegrown stuff that is just pure Python, maybe using like PyTest or something like that, and wanting to bring it into where I think the market is headed. And I think Great Expectations is very well positioned. There's a couple very minor players, but you guys have it's yours to lose. And that's the
Wait,
thing.
who do you think of when you say PyTest? who like, I'm not sure which part of the market you're pointing to right now.
Oh, well, I'm speaking of other, like, let's say testing frameworks within Python for oriented around data. I'm forgetting the names of, like, is it Soda is one, maybe Panera, whatever it's
Yeah,
called.
Soda, not Panera,
Yeah.
Pandera.
Yeah, exactly, Pandera. So things, those kinds of libraries may be ones that people have come across. But like from what we're coming from is looking from a mostly Python perspective of you've got a notebook and you want to, you've got this integrated into a series of steps in your ETL process and you want to validate as you go. You want to validate maybe this particular stage of a bigger ETL pipeline. And so you want to run some tests at the very end and you want to see, did this test run? And as a developer, you're starting first with just one notebook. So it's got to have a great experience within the notebook, not the bigger picture of GX Cloud. I get it, but you got to sell people on GX Cloud first.
And I'll be the first to admit the notebook experience actually got worse as part of 1.0.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm speaking to. Is that's where people
Got
are
it.
starting.
Okay.
That's your entry point. That's how you're first talking to developers is from the notebook. And so if that's how you're onboarding people, and you can't change this, people are already doing stuff in notebooks, so it's not like you can reset them. This is where you got to meet them where they're at. And I think that really it's just a simplified layer on top of the infrastructure you have. I mean, all the pieces all make sense. You know, you could debate whether there's too many or whatever, but they make sense from an architecture perspective, but the interface to the user can't be that complicated. You're exposing all your guts.
Yeah. I mean, the way we've thought of it is let's get the domain model right, and then we can build the onboarding workflows on top of that.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the things that gives me hope is I think the points that you put in your blog post today, or like the LinkedIn post today, are about as specific as anybody's told us externally. We've had a bunch of user interviews and a bunch of deep dives, but looking through it, there's nothing there that looks like it overturns the domain model. It's just a layer that's needed on top. Which is actually, I appreciate the criticism, still hurts, but at the very least, we got the 1.0 release right, I think, because we can do this without making big breaking changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell your engineering team, I definitely don't mean to, it sucks when someone, hits you in the gut with critical feedback, but it's the pain you need to experience to get to that point where people really love the product.
Yeah. Well, and again, we've been prioritizing just getting cloud in a good place. We need to come back to the notebook and data frames component. I can't give you a promise on like an exact date on that, but like it's a thing we're actively talking about. And you pushing on it, weighing in, like adds weight to that side of the roadmap.
Awesome. Wow, this is great.
Just so I'm completely clear, my mental model of the type of pipeline that you're running is kind of build it first in a notebook, convert it over into nodes in like an Airflow or Dagster type DAG, and then okay.
Yeah, I got to tell you, a lot of things out there are not as well formed as setting up Dagster or whatever. It's
so is this the kind of thing where you put it in a notebook and then at some point you clean up the notebook and that's actually the interface for running it?
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
A lot of things are done that way these days.
Yeah, no shame. I built a lot of stuff that way too. I know there are a lot of people who hate on notebooks, but I think they're actually pretty amazing for a lot of things.
I think Databricks honestly has like a really good approach where you define the delta Y tables, for example, and they're very weak, but they do have the constraints built in where you can do some minor data quality. I think amping up their game with data quality, integrating even widgets into their system would be awesome. They've got dashboards and whatnot that you could probably create some dashboards around. But I think the part for you guys is how do you maintain your the moat, so to speak, around GX Cloud. I think that's the thing, and that's where you really deliver on visibility around data quality, and that's your value.
I think that's right. There's some cool stuff we can do with like profiling and machine learning once you've got the infrastructure for that. But I actually think that's secondary to what you're describing, right? Like you've got to get basically the whole organization so they can see the same picture of data quality
Right.
together.
Yep.
And anything we can do to speed it up is great, but that's
Yep.
yeah, kind of secondary actually.
I mean, I think honestly, take that to the max. Like, what would you do? What would it take to get executives in a company really interested in data quality? Well, maybe they get reports emailed to them. I mean, I think a lot of developers hate sending things and emails, but that's the way executives are going to want to process it. Could be, you know, dashboards integrated in SharePoint or something like that, or in Confluence or Confluence kind of dashboards or something. Like, it's getting it where they are at and sharing that data quality where they don't have to, oh, I need to go to another website and figure out how to log in, you know.
Yeah, we have a bunch of conversations going with data catalogs,
Yeah.
basically for that reason, to like get the right metadata out of our system into their system.
Right.
It doesn't go as far as, the email that lands in your inbox.
Sure.
But yeah, sorry, Akshay, we should actually just ask more kind of like, what do you want it to do questions. But I've got one more kind of like diagnostic question, just because I really trying to understand how you're using it.
Sure.
As you're describing notebook workflows, are you doing more kind of connect to like a SQL data source from within that? Or is it more get a data frame in memory, wrangle the data frame, and do your validation on the data frame? Or is it a mix?
It's definitely a mix. I'm trying to think of what the most dominant or preferred. Yeah, a lot of the validation that I would want to do would be in terms of like Spark data frames, but it comes, usually those are populated with the SQL queries. So uh, the way expectations generally managed with like DBT with custom validations and things like that, more or less requiring you to write your own SQL. Like that's usually where we'll have tests that say ensure that there's no duplicate rows on this particular column or something like that. Or it requires a join between multiple things to kind of get that condition nailed. So that what we typically do on those sort of relational validation rules, and this is kind of the difference between rules that verify the quality of fields that are within certain ranges or certain data types, et cetera, is different than relational rules. And those relational rules that measure relations between rows or relations between tables, that's generally where we're writing custom queries, and we want to make sure that this certain business rule holds true. So we look for anything that violates that, and we want to make sure that that data set comes back empty. So that's it's a very frequent kind of pattern we use. So it's just ensure that this comes back empty. So the framework has little to do in terms of just verifying that the result is empty. If you can generalize those relationship tests, great, but it's really, I think it's really hard to do that because there's just way too many things. So custom, a lot of things are just done as custom queries that you expect it to come back with 0. But again, your value is not on how cool you can make all the 150 different kinds of tests or expectation kind of measures. It is surfacing data quality problems and the data quality health, both in both directions, both the healthiness and the lack of health.
Yeah, I hear you. Are you using the concept
and Fluent, I would say one other thing is, I got to tell you, I think you guys could benefit a lot from more Fluent-oriented interfaces. So like this data frame should be empty, kind of like that kind of expressive test. I mean, does that connect what I'm trying to say there? It's the should style assertions.
Is it specifically around using should, like that grammatical framing, or is it more that
very common? Yeah.
Okay. Is it more that it's just really natural language that like a non-engineer can look at it and they immediately grok it?
Yes, exactly. It's that fluent expression. We've seen a lot more in like C#. Honestly, they have really great fluent where you don't have to be a developer at all. You can read this and you think, well, the words are sort of words in a few places, but a business analyst can read that and understand it, which is helpful to developers. I mean, hey, we're humans too. being able to read something, it's like, oh, I know what this is doing without having to compute the thing in my head. It's just,
Hmm.
it's very
Yeah, I
clear
don't
what
have
it's
to like
doing.
unpack a JSON object and rearrange the fields in my head.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay,
exactly.
that makes sense. Um, Akshat, if you have other questions, jump in. Like I'm basically just using the time to like pull more out of you, right? Like anything that you want to
Yeah,
do to give us feedback, we're eager for it.
yeah. I mean, Abe, you're asking all the questions that I have here, so bang on
Yeah.
there. Yeah, Jonathan, I think anything that you can share with us, I'm taking notes here. I'd love to just do like a knowledge transfer here, all your thoughts. You've been giving us some great information so far, so I appreciate it.
Sure. And I'm really happy to, share my opinion because it helps me the more, you guys understand how we use it. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I don't want to move away from core necessarily. If like I understand that's probably where you want to focus. I am curious. You've been talking a lot about surfacing visibility around data quality and having a place where executives can process this data. Have you tried cloud at all? Have you gotten a sense of like what a core and cloud deployment might look like in those cases for you? I'm
I've not I've not gone as far as integrating with GX Cloud because I, like probably a lot of people, want to feel like I'm investing in the framework first.
Mhm.
And you kind of start with the GX core to get there. So again, that's like your on-ramp. And I mean, all I know at this point are what I've seen in demos and what you guys have shared and work sessions and the webinars. I mean, things like that. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense. So it's like start with core, right? We talked about the notebook experience here, get a sense of how things work, run a few proof of concepts, and then if you feel like this is the right framework for you, build out your initial testing framework in Python, and then cloud in the future could become something that you use for reporting or something else. But
oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, and we recommend products to our clients all the time. So I would happily, I want to recommend GX Cloud because I don't have any other choices except for what we do as homegrown reporting. And that's kind of where I'm stuck right now is with homegrown reporting, which, we like it. We like what we're doing, but it's much, I mean, what you guys are doing is much sexier, and I think it has the potential to go way beyond anything we can do ourselves. And that's why we want a product like yours, as long as it's affordable. And I mean, people do hate, having one more SaaS thing to deal with, but um, which is why I hope you guys can get to integration partnerships where we don't see that cost. It's integrated with maybe some
Yeah.
relationship that you've sort of embedded that cost. So that would be more ideal. Um, but yeah, I think that we we could um, we could support and recommend something as long as it's relatively easy for us to reliably integrate. Plus, what we tend to do is we train people at the companies we're helping to kind of get their data situation restructured. And in that process, we're trying to train them on the right ways of doing their data quality management, monitoring, all that kind of stuff. Well, I can't train someone on this right now. It's just too difficult. Like if an experienced engineer has challenges with it, just imagine we're not really dealing with um, experienced engineers is not typically who we have to train. We're training people that have 1 to 2 years of data science
Yeah.
exposure, more from straight out of school kind of
that
status.
you actually just answered my follow up to that. So awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you. That's great. Yeah. And I think earlier you mentioned that you're primarily working with private equity.
Yeah.
So that's
Portfolio
probably
companies. Yeah. The companies that are purchased, they're usually involving multiple acquisitions, and they've got a data mess, a huge mess because of all these data silos. So we kind of restructure things. We try to convert things and set up permanent pipelines for their financial reporting and, all that kind of stuff. So we can't be there forever. So we need to train people, and
right.
it has to be accessible and as straightforward as possible.
Got it. I have one follow-up question, and then I do want to give you an opportunity to talk about anything else that we haven't touched upon yet. But in how you go into an organization, what is the ideal model? So are you deploying the initial, say, GX framework for them and then training them on it, or is it are you playing more of a support role and having them engage from the very beginning and getting the setup?
Generally, we have to do a lot of like heavy lifting, and it's just too early to have more junior data engineers kind of do that work. So we're setting things up. We're getting it set up for success over the long term, and then we slowly integrate and train them as well, you know. And often they don't even have resources that are hiring resources, but they just have no clue how much it costs. So they generally are hiring at the lower end of the spectrum. So that's a big part of the challenge. But the last recommendation I have, I know I've said it before, but I think this is really worth it, is if you guys, surely there's some budget in that VC money somewhere to go like hire someone every week, hire someone for like a week and just continuously. You've got a 5-day stint to help improve GX4, and you give them some exercises, you observe how they did, and you iterate. Just like get better and better. So make it so that when they walk away, because right now you're gonna have some very frustrated people that you hire them and say, okay, here's my exercise. Don't tell them how to do it. They got to figure it out on their own. And say whatever tools you normally use, but this is what I want in.
Yeah.
And just like
we actually do some of this. We call it friction logging.
Okay.
And I mean, I think and it shames me to say it, but I think what's happening is most of our effort that's been going into the cloud side of things, we haven't been focused on the pure open source onboarding experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, y'all had to just because of the business stuff that you have to support or keep your investors happy, so to speak. But the realizing the onboarding, the on-ramping is happening through GX4.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're totally right there. If you're open to it, so again, I don't know exactly when, like, I actually have to take one step back. As I kind of cluster your concerns against the way that we have divided up and talked about our roadmap internally, most of the things you're talking about group to what we've called data frame based data sources. So if you look at the cloud experience right now, it leans pretty hard into SQL type things. And data frames, like they're there, you can do it through the core library, but it's not a great experience. It's kind of an afterthought right now. We know that we need to come back to that. We don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but when we do, would you be open to another conversation then? I mean, to like look at designs or like mocked up onboarding flows.
Definitely. Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
And I like the idea of mocking it up. You don't need to develop it. Just like, here's what would you like this interface to look like? Just simple notepad.
Well, and there's real art to it. I think there are a lot of people who know how to kind of mock up something in a UI and kind of, put the widgets on the screen in the right place. Yeah. Making an API as simple as possible without kind of screwing up the code layer.
Yeah.
It's a harder skill in some ways. It's still a UX skill, but it's harder. So actually meeting people who are opinionated about that is really cool because that's how you develop good taste there.
Yeah. All right, and if you don't like my taste, you kick me out. That's cool.
I mean, it's open source community, so like no matter what, we're listening. It's just you don't get to dictate the roadmap, but we're definitely going to listen.
Yeah. And I mean, I will say I found this really helpful. So thank you for taking the time to chat with us about it and share your thoughts on it.
Hey, I'm super happy to provide any value at all. Thank you so much for letting me.
Yeah. I think we're at time. I've got to run, but Jonathan, it's great to meet you. And again, I don't know exactly when it'll be, but we will reach back out when we get to these things.
Okay, thanks. And if I can have your recording's doing much better quality. If you can share that with me, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right.
Cool.
Okay.
Thanks very much.